Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Fish Friday number 258 and we have a good one for you today. And today's fish is a fish that is extremely well known throughout the world, and chances are if you've been in a grocery store, you've seen this fish's name. Today's fish that we're going to be talking about is, bam, the albacore. Now the albacore, or otherwise known as the longfin tuna, scientific name Thunus alalunga, again that is Thunus alalunga, it is part of the family Scombridae, which is the family of mackerel, tuna, and bonito. Now the albacore tuna is what would be scientifically known as a cosmopolitan fish, which is a fancy scientific word for saying it's found around the world. It's found in all tropical and temperate oceans, and it's found in the Mediterranean Sea. Essentially, if it's salt water between the two tropic lines, you can probably find the albacore if you look hard enough. Now, in terms of depths, you're going to find the albacore anywhere from 0 to 600 meters, which is, of course, 0 to around 1,970 feet in depth. So they can get pretty far down there. Now, larger albacore do tend to be more active around cooler areas, where smaller albacore tend to be more concentrated and more active in the warmer waters. A hypothesis I have about that is that, as many of you know, learning from the channel, tuna are actually a warm-blooded fish. And so the hypothesis would be that the larger albacore can't regulate their body temperature as well as the younger ones. And so they need that cooler water to sort of cool themselves off. Or conversely, the smaller albacore are not big enough to create warm-blooded through gigantothermia like the albacore can. So that's why they tend to be warmer. It's just a hypothesis. I have nothing to back it up. It's just something that I thought of. Now, the albacore is a large fish, but it is the smallest of the bluefin tuna. Its max length is around 140 centimeters, which is around 55 inches, and its max weight is around 60.3 kilograms, which is around 133 pounds. So it is a good sized fish, but as I said, it is the smallest of the bluefin tuna. Definitely not getting up to big eye or bluefin tuna size, true bluefin tuna size. In terms of body shape, I mean, it is a tuna. Most tuna have that same general body shape, a very fusiform, sleek body, very conical snout, streamlined, very large mouth, huge eyes. They got the finlets going down the back right here, set way far back dorsal fin. I mean, it's a tuna, and you know, it's fairly common body shape. And like most other tuna, it also has that sort of standard tuna coloration, that very, very dark blue back, fading to like a bluish silver right below that, to a very whitish silver going down the sides, with very small fins. In breeding, their fins will get pretty yellowy. I mean, it's kind of a tuna. That's one of the good things about tuna, is that it's a very, very noticeable fish. Very easy to be like, hey, that's a tuna. So how do you know that this is an albacore? Well, one thing you can go off is size. Remember, albacore are smaller, but size isn't always the best factor. So one great thing about the albacore is it does have these extremely long pectoral fins. And the pectoral fins are so long they can be up to about 30% of the body's length. And that's a pretty good diagnostic character. Now, they are often confused with big-eye tuna, especially big-eye juveniles, because big-eye juveniles also have extremely long pectoral fins. But big-eye tuna fins come to more of a rounded edge, whereas albacore come to a certain point. Now, eventually big-eye tuna just get bigger than albacore, so that's, you know, obviously another way to tell them apart. But other than that, albacore is just kind of like a large fish, but kind of a smaller tuna going from there. Males do grow faster than females in the albacore, but Other than that, there's no real sexual dimorphism, and growth rates are not exactly the best. So I wouldn't call this as a good sexual dimorphism fish. Now, it is a very predatory fish, however. Many people know that tuna eat everything. That's why they're so heavily sought after in terms of like recreational fisheries, because then when they do bite here, and you can see this guy is just living his life. And you can see the finlets are actually fairly yellow here. Very happy. I imagine albacore tuna fight really hard for their size, and they're very active. So probably, you know, a good experience to have. And you know, this guy sure seemed to enjoy it. But they're going to be eating squid. They do eat fish when they encounter, but I believe most of their food is actually squid. Kind of also your standard tuna. I mean, it's essentially standard tuna, smaller. But they are, like many other tuna, they are highly migratory. In fact, in their younger years, apparently the Atlantic and Japan, or the Atlantic, the Japan populations will migrate to North America and back, you know, within seasons. That's a very long way, so it's a very migratory fish. Something interesting about that, though, is I found out that Atlantic and Pacific populations just don't mix. So apparently there's something stopping them from going from major ocean to major ocean. Couldn't tell you why, but apparently that is a understood thing. In terms of their migration, they do travel in mixed schools with other tuna, like skipjack and yellowfin tuna, but unlike the tuna, they do differ in one way. It turns out that the albacore tuna has an extremely slow growth rate in terms of tuna. Very slow growing, very slow maturing. And that was an interesting little tidbit that I'm like, why is this fish growing at such a slower rate than the other tuna? And honestly, I don't have much of an answer there. So, good one to ponder there. And it was almost the thing that we were going to end the most interesting fact we were going to end the video on, but I had something better, or at least I thought. As you know, this is a very popular commercial fish. If you go into a grocery store, you're going to see albacore tuna on the shelves in cans and things like that. And in fact, in 2022, there was 225,000 tons of commercially harvested albacore. And that equates to about 450 million pounds. That is a lot of fish. But there were two interesting facts that came in terms of the commercial fishing side of this thing. And the first one was that albacore tuna are the only species that can be marketed as white meat tuna. And the canning industry actually uses that to differentiate albacore from other tuna. And that was a really interesting thing, because albacore tuna actually do have a lighter colored meat. They're not that deep darker red that some of the other tuna, especially bluefin tuna, have. So a white meat tuna, it's a very good marketing strategy, and I think they actually call it that, or chicken of the sea or something. So that's a really neat thing. But, and this goes into something that we've talked about in other episodes, especially when we discussed like The End of the Line, the movie. In 2010 to 2013, a study from Oceania tested over 114 samples of tuna, and specifically the albacore tuna, or the white tuna samples. They found that 84% of the white tuna samples were actually a fish called escalar, which is a complete separate species. Now, they do look like a tuna, but they are obviously not albacore tuna. And that leads into how little the general public actually knows about their foodstuffs and what they're actually getting from there. Now, I'm not saying don't eat tuna, not at all. But I'm just saying that be aware that what you are buying not be what you think you are getting. You know, that's not necessarily right, and it's definitely on the companies for trying to pull a wool over. In the canning industries, it's hard to pin down, but it's one of those things. That's why it's so good to try and find food, especially seafood, that is approved by NOAA and these other agencies as a sustainable fishery, because essentially that means that that business, that cannery, that company is holding themselves to a higher standard that they don't have to. A lot of people can get away with this stuff, and a lot of people have over, decades. But there are some companies out there that are trying to do better. So that's kind of my little thing, is just they are white meat tuna, but apparently in 2013, at least out of those 114 samples, a lot of it wasn't even albacore. But thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you do. I'd really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. If you'd like to support the channel, please click the link down below. It is by no means expected, but very much appreciated. Regardless, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and peace.